All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Denise Wetzel. I am a STEM research and learning librarian here at FSU. Usually you would find me at the Dirac Science Library, but I'm not there, obviously. So I'm going to be talking today about how to use Illustrator to create scientific graphics. I will say that this workshop does have kind of an assumption that you know just the bare basics of Illustrator. If you've not used Illustrator, please go ahead and put that in the chat just so that I know, and I'll try to talk through a little bit of where I'm getting things from a little bit more. And what we're going to do is I'm going to talk about figures in general, and then I'm going to get into using Illustrator to make like a specific graphic. And as I'm going through, please know that you can ask questions, put them in the chat. Paxton is here and Nick is here, and they are here to help to make sure that I don't miss anything. And so please feel free to put questions in the chat. I'd rather you interrupt me, or not even interrupt, but just like, say, hey, I have a question when I'm going through rather than like we get to the end, because sometimes we're going to like make figures and then we'll erase something. And so it's easier when I'm in that space to show it to you. Um, Also, please be aware that this is being recorded. I will make sure not to share names. If I do, that will be edited out. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and get started. And I do have a Google Drive that is for you to have access to. So I'm going to put that into the chat. And that is a drive that's all about making scientific figures. And it actually has a few different topics that we'll go over, and I'll show those to you as we're going through. I do want to talk about how we get access to Illustrator. You have two options. If you are a student, you can actually get access to Illustrator through the FSU Lab, and you just click on My FSU Lab, and you click Sign In. I'm not going to sign in. It will pop right up, but you'll see that it has Adobe Illustrator. It is the CS6 version. It's just a few years back, but it has everything the same as what I'm going to show you today. I'm using the Adobe Creative Cloud version. So mine is the Illustrator, this version 24.3. I know it's not updated, but if you are a faculty or staff member, you actually have access to the Creative Cloud version, and you would just get to that through the service catalog, followed by desktop and mobile computing. And then you can get to productivity tools, and usually Adobe Creative Cloud is sitting right here. So you have access one of these ways. And this one, you can then download this app. And when you have that app downloaded, you actually get access to everything. I say this also because if you are a student, if you're on campus, and even now, if you go into the libraries, we have scientific desktops. And so you can get access to this Creative Cloud. You just need to get a free Adobe Creative Cloud account. And so there's information on here as well for students to access it. And it's free to use. So that's a really good way to get access to it too. So I'm going to turn off my video, and that just helps so I don't get any skipping as I'm doing this workshop. But again, if you have questions, please go ahead and ask them. So when I think about creating figures, a lot of times we see figures throughout a lot of scientific literature. You'll see graphs. If I was to do like a search for like, I'm going to go to PLOS One. It's a very well-known journal, but it also tends to have figures. It's going to cover a lot of different areas, but I could choose like biology and life sciences. I'm going to go with biochemistry. That's a lot of choices. I'm just going to say view all. But you can see the newest ones. We just see the cover that way. But I can come in here, and you're going to see, if I was to scroll down here, a lot of figures. And so this one's going to have a bunch of tables because I just chose one. So we see graphs. You can also see whenever I'm thinking about it, science always has a lot of figures. Also, I have, things are going to open up in every different direction, I can tell you. Actually, in here, I put an example. So this comes from Cell Reports. So this is an example of a scientific, actually, visual abstract. Some journals are doing this now where they'll have this right at the beginning, either in place of or aside of a regular abstract that you might see. Then you might also see, sorry, I have like 15 things to open. Like this is another another image. That actually comes from an article, and I can tell you that it's really a lot to see, right? We're looking at a lot of different information here. So when I look at the differences though between these two, and I'm assuming you can see my screen, is that correct? Can I get confirmation?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. If I look at the differences between these two, let me see. What did I call this one? S2. Between these two images, and I know it's going off, but still. When I look at this image, it's a lot going on, right? We have things going, there's arrows, there's some arrows that go this way and that way. And do you know where you would start to look at this image? Like where, do you have like information on like, can you look at this and say you go to this and then you go to that? Like, can you tell the story?
No.
Yeah,
It's so messy.
it is. It really, really is. And then if I look at this one's to me a lot better because I know I start over here and you're going this path or that path, right? But a lot of times when we're thinking about the layout or the story flow, you're kind of trying to figure out what is our direction we want our story to go. And if we think about Western culture, I guess we're going to go with that. A lot of times we read books from left to right. If you're looking, I know in like many Eastern cultures, then we'll have like the opposite way of reading books. But many journals do have guides and they'll talk about, you're looking at this from left to right. So that's something to be aware of. But you want to kind of think about the composition and flow of your figure as a way as like if someone's reading a story. And also when I'm looking at the difference between these two, like to me, I can look at this one and be like, that's a lot going on. This one I can kind of see I go this way or I go that way. I feel like this is more a story that you would tell someone, like if you were like talking to a friend, right? You could explain this a little bit better. This one, you're going to be drawing everything. You're going to be like, I have all these ideas and they're just all on here, right? But it's a little bit harder to just, I'm trying to see. Oh, to see what that story is. So sometimes what a really good idea is actually to think about what you want to say in a figure and actually take a pen and paper. I know that sounds, we have all this great technology and we have Illustrator and stuff, but sometimes if you start off by trying to sketch it out on like a pen, like in paper style, or if you have like a tablet and maybe like a I have an iPad, so like an Apple pen that I can use with it. I could even just like sketch it out generally on there, because you can use like the Photoshop app and even just kind of get this idea out of your head, kind of just a sketch and figure out what are the main points of what I'm trying to say. Because that helps overall when you're making figures to tell the story. A lot of times when we're talking about this also, you have to think about your composition and your flow of what you're doing. So that includes things like going unidirectional. So for example, in this one, is my story starting off over here and going that way? Again, this is standard. People look, to the left and you're reading to the right, or is it, I could turn it around even, and is it going from top down to bottom? So is it horizontal or vertical? But a lot of times stories, you're going to follow something like this. Sometimes when we're talking about feedback loops or something along those lines, we actually run into a very cyclical nature, right? So I might want to make sure that whatever I'm doing is actually in a big circle, but it's a big circle that's the entire page. And I still am going to kind of want to have, starting probably up here in this corner and going around. Um, Often we can see lab protocols, or maybe even a string of events, and we're going to take more of like a Z-shaped path, our eyes, because we're kind of like reading through them. And then if you're doing a poster design, a lot of times we think about poster design as kind of having like this M path. I know it's kind of like funky here, but if you look overall, it makes an M. And that's because people are, usually reading starting up here in this corner and going down. It's going to do your center and then over on the right-hand side. So what you're seeing though for a lot of these is you are starting up here in our top left corner. And so wherever your story is starting, you're usually wanting to start over here on the left or up here in the top right-hand corner. In this one example, I have everything open. In this example, they do a fork shape, which is also, right, we're starting over here on the left, and you're still having these two outcomes. And it's usually going from this direction and then out, or you might start at the top and then down. But that is kind of how you're orienting your story, right? And you're kind of telling this that way. And as we're going through, we're going to talk about how much arrows are important. So I've put like one arrow in here, but like the arrow size can be very, very important because it can help show just importance and movement, and arrows overall are a big deal when we're talking about scientific figures, and I'll try and explain that better. And if you're ever unsure, you can always put little numbers like A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4 in to help guide the reader through. So that's kind of like a brief layout story flow, but it's important to think about whenever we're thinking about like creating figures. So in this folder that I have under example, you'll see that I actually have an example this one is an Illustrator example, and it's because I'm going to talk about that. And so if you are creating something in Illustrator, and if you want to create your own thing as we're going, I would say go to New, and then you can choose a custom sized or whatever size you want. I'm just working in a 12 by 12. I'm keeping it in the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black color for right now. Sometimes I will see that certain journals do say they want the RGB color, so the red, green, blue, but it's easier to work in cyan, magenta, yellow, black, and then also change it over to RGB or grayscale. Also, if I was to change it, sometimes I get this little error message because it wants me to actually create my color mode in this way. And then I would just click on create, and it would create a blank artboard for me to use. Again, I like to keep my artboard in kind of the essentials classic look. You can always change to like an essentials mode if you want. I like kind of the classic. I have two screens, so like things are all over the place. I'm gonna just snap that up there. Okay. And then all of these are actually separate windows. So you can add or change any of them this way. So I could click on color and it can add in color to this window. I'll put it in there. So what I'm going to talk about color. And so I'll show you how to make this. But before we do that, I want to talk about why using color is really important and how you use color. And this is talking about things like association and temperature and contrast. All right, so this is a very basic figure. It was made more just to illustrate some of the points I want to talk about. But when I'm looking at this, what you're seeing is I'm using colors like green and red. And when I think about these colors, I have to think about the fact that red is very powerful, right? You draw your eyes whenever you see something that is red. And generally, it is something that can almost be too much if you have too much of it on your figure. So when we're thinking about colors, we want to think about what colors we're actually using and how we're using them together. So in here, in this, I do have a colors chart, and I'm going to pull open. I don't think I have it open here. Again, I have like lots of things because I want to show you everything. Okay, so this has a lot of color basics. It's kind of a really great resource. It comes out of actually Wisconsin, and it talks to you, if you read through it about like the color wheel and spectrums and what colors should you use. And you'll see that red, it's really attention grabbing. So this is when you really want to get to the point of an idea. We also want to be really careful when we're thinking about what are we emphasizing or not emphasizing. So when I'm designing something, right now, I have like these bright yellows. I have this green over here, this red. And so I'm thinking, the bright is basically becoming too much. Like you can kind of like look at this and your brain starts going, oh my gosh, it's kind of like a rainbow. There's so many colors and you don't know where to start, where to look. And so that's where you kind of want to start thinking about, yes, you might want to use a color, but maybe looking at the opacity of something. When something is a little bit more not as opaque, you're then going to actually be able to help create that not to be quite as jarring for someone. Another thing we have to always think about as well is the fact that a percentage of the population is colorblind. Red and green tend to be colors that our folks that are colorblind have a harder time seeing. So we probably want to shy away from using those, or at least if I have a figure like this figure, I could actually select everything and I could come up here to edit and edit colors. And I could say convert to grayscale. And then I could see what this would look like if it's not printed in color. And so this is where I kind of have like a contrast issue going on because it looks in grayscale that these colors are very similar. So it looks almost like this is that, and that is then going in here, right? So I need to be cognizant of my grayscale, just the differences. Also, if people are printing out with a black and white printer only, this is what they would see. And then if you're talking about the differences, it's going to be harder for someone to see. I'm just going to Control Z to take that off. So one thing I would do is I could take a color and I could actually come over here to appearance. And if you don't have appearance, again, you go up here to window and there's appearance and it has my path, which is this green, this figure that I had made, and it has a default opacity. This is for the fill, this is for the outline of default. If I click on that one, I can actually go ahead and I can take that opacity down, and now it's going to have a much lighter hue to it. So it's going to be a little bit maybe different when we think about looking at this in a grayscale. So I'm going to do the same thing again and look at this. And I'm going to, edit edit colors, convert to grayscale. And again, I still think that they're too similar, but it's, you're looking at it that way. Another thing you have to think about is almost, if you like comic books, almost like a hero villain idea, right? Warm colors tend to be villains. Cool colors, I believe, tend to be heroes. So, we'd probably look at this side as like the hero and this side is the villain. So that's might be telling us a story. It's subliminal a little bit, but you're telling the story that the bad is kind of where things are going. So what I would do maybe actually here is come and change this color. Ooh, I saw it, everything clicked. You don't want that. I don't want that today. And change this color to something else. If I don't like any of these colors, I can always add in more. There's lots of libraries. I can make my own libraries. I have neutral colors. And so now I've made it this way. I'm going to actually change this one just a little bit. So now I'm going to make this one a little more grayscale. And there's a little bit more of a contrast going on, right? So it's something just to think about. If you're not sure about what colors to use, or if the color choices that you're making, if they are helpful when we're talking, especially looking at color palettes and steering away from some of those red and green colors, you might want to actually check out this free tool. It's from Adobe. It's called color.adobe.com. And it actually helps you make palettes. So you would just sign in. And if you have, like, again, I'm through FSU, so it's going to just do my single sign-on, which I've already been on stuff today. So you can actually save palettes to your library. Here, I'll make this into a light theme, so it's a little bit easier. And so I can come in here and it can tell me, I can choose, oh, I want like a triad palette, and I can move something around if I want, and it's going to help me figure out, colors I want to use. I can also go into this is the part I really like, is the accessibility tools. And so I'm looking to make sure that this is colorblind safe. So if I was to move this, it's telling me that B and E, and it's putting a little note on them, that these are in conflict. And so it'd be hard to make these colors distinct. So maybe I want to move a color around until I can get into a better color mode. Right now, my color mode's RGB. I can change it over to the cyan, magenta, yellow, black. And so if I like something that I like, I can actually look here and it's going to show me what the numbers are. So I can actually go ahead and put these into my Illustrator. I can also show the sliders if I want to see what this is for putting in. So if I was to say, hey, I want to add in a color, I'm going to say yes. And I could then take, let's see, 41,079,6. 41,079,6. And so now, I changed the whole thing, but still, what you're seeing is I put that color in. And then if I like it, I can save this. And then I can always come back up here to my libraries and I can actually see color palettes I've used previously. So like this is like an engineer technical drawings palette I used for something recently. And so I can come in and I can see palettes that I've liked. I can see what their colors are. I can download this and it works out really well. It gives me the Pantone colors if I want to use that within Illustrator, color modes. So this is a great free resource. I really like it. You can also make gradients if you have something. Like if I already have a file, I have this cave picture that if you went to my Photoshop workshop you would have seen. But I can choose how many gradient stops I want, and I'm going to say I want 7. So it's going to make the gradient. I can also move these down if I want, but it's going to help me create what the gradient is for this photo. And then I can save my gradient. And now if I go into my libraries, this is like the same photo, but I moved this one down further, so I would have this gradient to look at, to work with, and it gives me all the codes. So just a great resource if you're having trouble coming up with colors. I like to talk about that one. So, all right. It does. Thank you for the question. It does kind of depend if it's going to be viewed through a print or online only. So I like to keep mine on 300 points per inch, and that's because it's going to have the highest quality. And actually, let me show you. I think this would be helpful. If you go into this Google Drive, again, under colors, there's like a figure preparation. And this one comes from Science, which is a AAAS magazine. And when it talks about image types, do you want to use like a vector line art or a raster bitmapped? So I'm keeping mine on a really high 300 points per inch because I can then use that to take that out as like an encapsulated postscript, the EPS version, or I would have an easier time of making clean lines when I'm like making something in a PDF versus if I was to have like a low raster level. And that's just because you're going to get a lot more blurring at the edges. You're welcome. Okay, so that's kind of where I wanted to start off with this. I'm going to come back to this image, but I want to actually work on making an image from scratch with y'all. And we'll talk about arrows and lines because that's also super important. So I'm going to come back to this. But what we're going to do is we're going to go into this. Let me put this in here. Oop. There we go. I'm going to actually work on this figure, not this figure, not that figure. We're going to basically work on, I believe it was this one. Yeah, we're going to work on making this figure because I like the story that this one is telling. It also has a lot of really good basic ideas, and we can talk about arrows with it because arrows and lines, it's actually really important how they're used. And so we're going to work on making this. And again, if you have questions, please just let me know. So I'm in my blank document that I've made, and this is just, I believe I did a 12 by 12. And I know my figure is not going to actually be this large, but I just wanted a nice large artboard for my figure. So what I'm going to do first is I need to make a rectangle. So, or a box. It's actually going to be a square in this way. But so what I'm going to do is actually come over here, and yours will probably be on this rectangle tool. It's the letter M. And I will say that Adobe has a lot of really great shortcuts. And if you learn your shortcuts, it's going to be way faster. But I'm going to really try and like point out where things are because I want to make sure everyone can follow. So I'm going to come over here to my rectangle tool. It's the letter M, and I'm going to make a square. There's no square tool because Yeah. So I have two choices. So I can just like freehand, make a square. But you'll notice as I'm making this, I could make this be any different size. Now I do have guidelines on, and if you don't have these on, you can turn on smart guides. It's under view, and so that helps me see the different points. But what I'm going to do is, in order to make a little bit better of a square, to make sure that my square is square, I'm actually going to hold down the Shift key. And now as I pull out, it's going to keep this association. So it's going to stay in this shape. It's really helpful to me to make sure that I am keeping this not too wonky, right? I want it to be in the shape that I'm looking for. I'm going to click on the letter V, which is my selection tool. You will use V many, many different times. This is probably one of the most used, if not the most used tool on my toolbar over here. So, and then I'm just going to click off because I want to click off of this square I just made. Then I'm going to click on my letter M because I'm going to make another rectangle, and I want to start around my halfway point. So when I start doing this, you'll notice that since I have my guidelines on, I can see this little blue X that's in the middle, and that tells me that's the center. And so since I know I'm in the center, I'm just going to hold, and I'm going to make this fit that area. And the reason I'm doing this is because when we had looked at that figure, I should not have closed it. You'll notice that the top and the bottom, they actually have a color background to them. One is more of like a cream and one is more of like a light blue. So what I'm going to do then is, I'm going to click on the letter V, and that takes me out. I'm going to click then on the first box that we made. So this is the box, the entire box. And I'm going to come over here and I want to add a gradient to it. So I have gradient sitting over here. If you don't, under window, you should find gradient. And I'm going to say, okay, I want to add a gradient. And actually, let me start off. Sorry, let me go back to swatches. I'm going to say I want to add a swatch to this. So I need to have one color on one side. I want to have, like a cream color, and then it's going to be white over here. So I'm going to pick something that's pretty like a cream color. If I'm not seeing anything, again, I can come over. I can either create my own swatch by just like moving and adding some yellow into here, and I can say okay. And it's going to actually fill in this entire box. Now, you don't have to do this part, but if I was to move this, you'll see that it filled in the entire box. That is pretty yellow. So what I'm going to do, I think what I'm going to do is actually come over here to my swatch. And if I double click on this little box right here, because this is my fill, I'm actually going to take it down just a notch because that is very, very yellow. Oop. And you can see, okay, that's got a green. We're going to go with it. But you can see you can kind of play around with everything. It does currently have a black outline, and I'm going to just leave that on there for right now because it's the entire square, so it's kind of giving my figure an outline. And what I'm going to do then is come and click on gradient. And so right now I have my gradient. I can choose if I want a linear gradient, a radial, or a free form. I do want a linear gradient. And so then what I'm going to do is I can say, do I want it to be darker or not as dark? I'm actually going to click on my fill again because it didn't take. Linear. We're having issues. Just a moment, please. All right, I'm gonna do this. Okay, so I just was on the white and black and I chose that. And then I came down here and I chose my gradient slider and I double clicked on it and it gave me the choice of this color I had chosen before. And then you can see it's going from my cream color to the white. If I want that not to be as creamy and I just want more of the yellow over here and the white over there, I can do it this way. I can actually pull it up even more if I want. But yeah, so that's the first one. We're going to do the same thing with this one on the bottom, and we're going to see if we can actually just make it. So this one had more of a like a cyan color to it. I'm going to make like a cyan. Sorry about that. It's being a little cranky today. Okay. So what I'm going to do is just come over here. I'm going to try and get a not as bright color. It's a little better. And then I'm going to pull this up as well. And we're just being a little cranky today, but that's okay. Sometimes that happens. Currently I have this outline and I don't want an outline on this one. So I'm going to come back up to my swatches and I'm going to click on this white box with the line through it. And so what that's going to do is it's going to remove the line for this box. And because this box is on top of this box, you're actually not seeing this line all the way at the bottom if you notice. So I think what I'm going to do is just take off that stroke as well, so that line, and that way it all kind of is happy together. Okay, so we've done this, and the thing then after I do my background is I need to kind of start the story, right? And the story, when I started, remember it was over on the left-hand side. We had the AB monomer. And so that's really just a line. So line, you use this line segment tool, which is just a backslash. And so I can right click and choose, or I can just do a line. So I'm just going to draw a line. Just draw a line, kind of like in here. And after I draw that line, you'll see that I have this end, we have a circle in the middle, and I have this end of my line. And so what I'm going to do is actually click on the letter A, which is my direct selection tool, because what this does is I can actually click on different parts of my line. So like I have an anchor here, and you can move things around individually. I can also come to my pen tool, which is right here. Usually it looks like this. I'm going to say add anchor point. So I'm going to add an anchor point in. I'm going to add it right there in the center. I think I'm going to add two more, one on either side. And then I'm going to click on my letter A again. And so now I can click on these and I can start pulling this and actually changing the shape of it, right? So I have, this kind of look to it. I mean, when I looked at this, we have this really kind of flowy design. I might want to pull this one side in. And it's kind of, I could just draw a line with my pen tool. That might be a little bit easier, or I can try and make the shape this way. There's these dots you see here, and if you pull those, it actually rounds corners. It's super helpful. Like on this one, I can round my corner down. This one I can click on and then round this corner up. It won't let me go any further, but oop. Where'd my thing go? So my right now, if you notice, my swatch is no fill. It's on the line. It doesn't matter if there's no fill because it's not, wide enough to have a fill, but I'm gonna just go ahead and make my stroke this orange color. And I'm also going to come to my stroke window, which is up here in the window, and I'm going to make it just a little bit wider. I'm going to make this like a 4-point because that makes it a little bit easier for me to see this. I also won't lose it. Sometimes, you're looking and you're like, where to go? Because if it's clear or it's transparent, it's a little bit harder to find, right? But you can see that as I'm playing around, I'm kind of like changing the shape that we had just had for this figure. And then if I really like it, I can click on the letter V, and then I can also change the size. I can make it small, I can make it large, I can choose how I want it to kind of look, but I'm just playing around with that. And that kind of goes here in the middle. And then on this figure, we also had a text box. So that's T, like text for type tool. I can also right click and it gives me the options. I'm just going to click on just to write in a section. It's going to give you some Latin. What I like to do is, especially if I'm working on something that I've already, created or something like that, that maybe you've written already about, have everything like in a Word document, because doing these extra figures, or I mean these special, like this B here, it's really hard to do that in Illustrator itself. So I can just have it in a Word document, Control C, come over here, Control V, and it puts it in for me. And I don't have to like figure that out, right? It makes it really nice. So once I put that in, I'm just going to click on my letter V, or you can click on the selection tool. So I have that there, and now I can move this around. A lot of times when we're thinking about type or texting and labels, you want them to be parallel actually with our figure that they're for. So I want this text, this label essentially, to just be where it's labeling. If it's not where I can label it really easily, so if I was to be over here, like I just put caption, these I didn't have space. I'm pretending I didn't have space to put the caption. I can put a line, but I have to end that line with a dot because I don't want to confuse the reader that they think that there's an arrow, so there must be motion. So for this, I can just come in and I can just put it next to it. I can also highlight, and up here in my this toolbar up here, or yours might be over on the side. There's lots of options of where it might be. You can actually choose that character style. And then this gets into, are you doing something that is for is this something that you're doing for like text, or is this something that's going on a poster? Is this something that's going online? Because that is going to be a little different with how you use the different text. I'm just going to go ahead and use that, and I'm going to make the font just slightly larger for right now, because I can always redo my entire figure, like, size it large and small. So I want it to be more in line with what I'm doing. So now I have my label on there. So after we make this, we're going to need to make 2 arrows, because if you remember that figure, I'll pull it back up. We have this figure, it's more rounded than mine, but you make these 2 arrows to show the 2 different paths. So what I'm going to do is use my line segment tool. So we used that once before, and what I'm going to do is, so I want to kind of be here in the center area because it's showing the 2 different paths we can take. And so I'm just going to click one spot and go up, kind of at a diagonal. And then once I have this, you'll notice that it doesn't have any stroke, it doesn't have any fill. So if I click off of it, it is going to disappear. I'm going to give it a weight. I'm going to give it a weight of 2 points. And then right now it has, because I gave it a weight, it has a stroke that is black, which is fine. I do want to add on an arrowhead. So this is the back side. So if I add an arrowhead, it's going to show my direction going that way, back towards my monomer, or I can add an arrow going away. And then you do get a lot of preset arrow styles. There are some that are more for like graphic nature, but we can choose which style we like. Also, you can say, do you want your arrowhead to be coming off of the line? So here's the end of my line segment. Do I want it to go past that line segment, or do I want the arrowhead to end at the line segment? So you have that choice. And once I've made one, what I really like to do, because I don't want to have to like, just make the whole thing again. I'm going to click on V from my selection tool, click off, and then click back on this, Control C, Control V, because that's just going to give me another one, right? And then I can just pull it down and it's already going to have the same, like the same arrow and the same information. And now I can see that my line is extending. It's the same on both sides. It does not look the same, but it says it's the same. So we're going to go with it. And so you can look at it that way. Okay, so that's the way that I can use my arrows to kind of make sure that I am, showing direction. And as I'm doing this, and I'm doing this quickly because I'm trying to show this so everything's not lining up 100%, but I'm okay with that. When we think about the weight of an arrow, it's really important to think about like how important the motion is. So for example, on this one, if you look, I have a dash line. And so when we think about dotted lines, this can mean like a future or past state. So something that's going to be happening in the future, or something that happened previously, but it's not showing, motion in our actual figure now. The only other time I really see cut lines or these dotted lines is if you're thinking like a cut line. This is where something is cut, or you might think about a coupon, right? So dotted lines are really, really interesting, and you pretty much, unless you have a specific use for them, you don't want to use them unless you're showing that like future or past state. Also, when we think about our lines, you want to think about the weight of a line. So usually it's going to be a 1 to 2 point weight, but sometimes if something is super important, I'm going to make it, well, that's very short. So maybe that was a little too short for that line. I'll make this one, we'll make this a not dotted line anymore. But I'll make the weight of this line, darker. And so now if I was to look at this image, right, it's like this happens and then this happens. And this is like the most important thing. When you're looking at these different lines, kind of thinking about your arrows, what is more? So it might tell me that there's more going into something, right? Or that this is the most important part. It kind of really is important to think about it like that. Yes, so when we're thinking about lines, thinking about your weight, thinking about, are they dotted? Are they just regular lines? The number of elbows. So an elbow is where it changes direction. And so elbows, you have to be careful, like, do they make sense in the picture? Do you want it to like show that it's having something that's taking many paths? That can kind of be really important as well. So we're back here. The next part of this image that I'm looking at is these little guys. There's like 3 of them, 1, 2, 3, and they're actually not too hard to make. So what we're going to do is make little polygons, and you will find your polygon here under the rectangle tool. So there isn't just a shortcut key, but you can right click on this rectangle tool and go to polygon. And so what I'm going to do is make a 6-sided polygon. And to do that, I'm just going to draw out, and mine's already at 6. If yours is not, you just use the up and down arrows. So I can make a triangle, I can make a square, I can make a 5, a 6, a 7. I mean, you can go as far as you want. It just becomes a circle at some point. And I want to make a 6-sided polygon. So I've made that polygon. I actually want this polygon, when I look at it, to be orange. And I don't want it to have any, I want it to be orange, and I want to change my line so that there's no outline. And I'm going to just click off that. And it doesn't matter. I mean, I can make it out here if I want, because we're going to move it. I'm just, creating it in a space where you can see this. So I'm making this polygon, and now I'm going to add in 3 line segments. And we're going to just use our line segment tool that's over here. And basically what I'm trying to do is go from one corner to another corner. And I want to make sure that I do have a stroke on this one, but I want it to be white because I want it to not be black, but I need it to actually, I want to be able to see it, but I don't want it to be the same color as these lines that I'm making. So I made 1. I'm going to make 2. And I'm just going to make 3. All right, so I've made 3, and now I have 1 of these polygons. And so what I'm going to do actually, I'm going to click on this, and I should not have made it in there. Okay, I'm going to do Control G, which makes a group. And now I'm going to pull this off to the side, and y'all, I know they're all in here. I should have made it on the side. Usually I make it on the side, but I was like, I can see the difference. So what I'm going to do is click on everything. I'm going to do Control G, and that's going to make a group. And so now what I can do actually is move this entire thing, and it's going to move my lines. And you'll see now that it's not, leaving behind the individual lines. And I want to do that so I can Control C and Control V to make 1, and Control V to make another one. And now I have 3 of these, which is what I need to match my image. So if that is what I'm looking for, I'm just going to do Control Shift G, and that's going to actually undo my group. So if I was to move, you'll see I can move one of those lines. And so now I've made this. I'm going to go over all of them, and I'm going to do Control G, and now this is one group. So groups can be super helpful because that can help us make these different shapes. And now I can, transform, but you'll notice, same as like when I was making the boxes before and I'm moving, I can actually mess up kind of, what the polygons look like. So what I would want to do is if I want to make them smaller, I'm going to hold down the Shift button, and that's going to keep my aspect ratio the same. And then I can just drag it over to where I'm going to put them. If I want to actually move them, if you get this little curved arrow, I can, move it so that it's more angled. That's perfectly fine too. But we're just gonna use it this way. So that has kind of made these, and now I'm just gonna, basically, I'm gonna take my text label over here, Control C, Control V, move it right down. And then I know that this one is this one. And I'm going to change my text label. And now I've added those in. And you can kind of see like how this is just coming together. It's just a bunch of parts that are put together, and it's not too bad, hopefully. The next part that we would do is make a series of lines to make another fork. So what I'm going to do is actually just I'm going to make this over here. So I'm going to make sure that I have no fill on my stroke, but I am going to have a black line. And so I'm going to make a one line, and then I am going to click off. I'm going to do my line segment tool, and I want to do another one. And because I'm making an arrow, I am going to add an arrowhead on this. And again, I'm just going to Control C, Control V, so that way I can take this and just make it the same. So we've done the exact same thing as what we did before. We just, because of this one, this arrow does show the movement and then two paths. So it kind of has like a line before my fork. And what I'm going to do is just using my selection tool, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to Control G to make it a group so I can move it. Oop. And then I'm going to put this over here. And I can Control Shift G to undo that. Or I can continue to move and make it bigger or smaller, or just move a section that I don't like. Something like that. So kind of just playing around. Again, it would take a little more time, but we got this. All right, so the next part of the figure are my amyloid fibers. And these are, when I look here, are kind of like these wavy lines, right? And if you notice, it actually is this pattern on these lines. So there's a really fun way to make patterns. So what I would do is I'm actually going to click on an object. I'm actually going to choose one of these. Oop. I don't want the whole thing. So I'm going to choose one of these. And then what I'm going to do is go over here to stroke. Actually, let's back that up. I'm going to make my stroke first. So what I'm going to do is just make one line, and then I'm going to make a smaller line right below it. Okay, so still, I've copied that, and I'm going to click on my line, and then I have the choice of, I'm going to come over here to my pattern brushes, which I can add. Here under brushes. So if I go under brushes, it's under my color swatch. So if you're looking, or you can look under window and you'll see brushes. So you have all these different types of brushes, and I'm going to choose new brush, and I'm going to say pattern brush. Okay. And then what I want to do is, let me highlight that again. I'm going to Control C. And what it's going to do is actually take this. And so right now it just took not the whole image, because I remember I grouped it for the three different lines, but it's taking this image and it's making it into a pattern brush of its own. And like you could change the color, you can change, you know, what it does on corners, what it does on the lines, how it makes an arrowhead, things like that. I can also fix my spacing. So I can say I want like 1 point spacing or 1% spacing. And so if I like that, not on that one, but if I like what I'm making, I can then click on this and I can actually use that as my pattern from my brush. So what I would do then is I would want to not do a fixed scale. Let's do, so I could do like a lot of spacing, which makes a lot of little ones. So then I can also play around with my hues and tints and things like that. But I'm gonna click OK. And so it's gonna play with your brushes and kind of what you've done, but this is a way to actually edit and make new patterns. So what I'm gonna do actually is I'm gonna Control G to make this a group again, and I'm gonna Control C because I would rather make my brush a little different. And so now it's going to make it my pattern brush. And then I can come in here and I can say like auto centered. And I can just really kind of play with this. You know, if I want it to go that way or that way, there's ways of, you know, making it kind of transform to fit your needs. You can also pick one of the brushes that are already in here. I mean, if I wanted, I could do a brush like this. And then what I would just do is change my color of this. When I look at the brush color, you know, I could choose something that's a little bit more on the orangey scale. Because a lot of times when we're thinking about colors, if you have things that have a similar color throughout, right, that will make it so that it helps people associate that similar colors are the same thing or have a similar outcome. And it can help emphasize those differences. Another thing that I could do is actually take my pen tool, if I want it, and draw kind of this shape. And then that could give me the shape without having to edit out the lines I had just made. So that would be the same thing again with my stroke. I probably want to make just a little bit of a bigger stroke. I can add in, if I want a gradient on it, I can add in, I can change this appearance of my stroke. I mean, I can add in this type of pattern. There's lots of things that you can do. Yes, so lots of options. And I'm going to keep going because I want to show you, actually, we're going to use a couple tools now. So we have two options. We have a pen tool and you have our, down here, which is letter N, is our pencil tool, which is under the shaper tool. So I want to kind of on this, make these the cytotoxicity in here for this, looks like a cell. And to do that, I need to make this shape. And I could try and make a circle and play around with all the different shapes. But another thing I can do is actually try and free draw it. I'm actually going to Control plus to zoom in so you can see a little bit better. I'm going to just use my space bar to move this. But what that means is I can either freehand it with the pencil, I can freehand it with the pen. They're both a little different, but they have good things and bad things about them. Um, so what I'm going to do is try and do this with the pencil. And you have, when you're using the pencil, you have two different options. You can make your pencil be highly accurate, or you can make your pencil be highly smooth. And what that means is if I have it on accurate and I try and draw this, and I'm going to promise you I'm not the best at drawing. Okay, so I drew this. Oh, I still had that other stroke. Let me go fix the stroke. See, it leaves whatever you just had, and but you'll see that I've made this, and this is what I just drew, right? It didn't smooth it at all. It pretty much just made what I drew. Now, if I use the pencil tool and I put it on smooth, I'm going to draw this again. Nope, I'm going to try that again. When I do that, you'll notice that all my little wiggles that I had over on this other one that was highly accurate are gone. And it's, tried to like be like, oh, maybe you actually wanted it to be nice and smooth. So it's trying to fix it for you. The other option is to use the pen tool, which is the letter P. And so what I can do is actually draw this, and I kind of would make it almost like a pointy figure first. And if I close it, then it's not going to adjust it. But here, what I can do then is actually take my direct selection tool, and I could come in to all of these and, make it smoother, not as smooth. It lets you do this type of stuff. If there's any of these little dots and I want to pull, not that one. I can actually pull, corners in, pull them up. So it's kind of like what your choice is, which one you want to use. I'm actually gonna pretend like I did a decent job on that first one that was highly accurate. And we can still come over here with my direct selection tool. It adds all these tiny little points. So if you look here, I could actually choose any of these anchor points and actually come and edit them. So don't just think that you can only do that with the pen tool. You can actually do that with this pencil tool. You just get more points to kind of edit. We're going to pretend this one works, just in the interest of time. So I've made this, and now what I want to do is come over here to my color, and it has an orange outline. So I'm actually going to go to my swatches, and I'm going to say my stroke is orange. My fill is like a tan color, kind of goes up with that one. And I'm going to click off of it, and then that gives me my cell. Kind of looks like an outline of like a Pikachu or something, but we'll just roll with it. And then the next thing that I'm going to add onto here is I need to add the center. And so to do that, it's not a perfect like circle, so I'm not going to use the circle. I'm actually going to use I'll use the pencil again, because I can just come in here and draw like a little circle-ish shape. The one at the bottom with no cytotoxicity, it does have like a perfect circle, but this one, oh, it's on smoothing. I forgot. Let me fix that. I don't want it to be perfectly circular, so I'm gonna make it just kind of not 100% perfect. This is when it's great to not be 100% perfect. And so this is gonna have an orange stroke, and it has an orange circle in the middle. So you can see that here. And again, if I didn't like the size, I can always readjust it a little bit. Now, if I'm also looking at this image, you'll notice that in the back here, it's showing, you have this action happening. So, a couple different options. In the folder that I gave you, which has example, there's actually an EPS file that has a bunch of lightning bolts. And so you can actually open that um, with Illustrator. So if I was just to go to open and go ahead and click on it, it's 3547. It's going to open it. And I can choose one that I think kind of fits what I'm looking for, a version. And so what's really nice is because of the file type, I can literally actually come in here and say, I think that this one would work. Control C, go back over to my artboard, Control V, and now I can just have this in here to edit from. And I just want to make it a black fill with a black outline, and I can, readjust the size, and I can add that in here. It's really big, but we'll pretend. So I didn't have to like draw it myself. It's really good to be able to find some of these type of different images and things online, and there's a bunch out there. Pixabay actually has some. I believe Pixabay has. They have photos, but yeah, they have a bunch of different vector images and things that you can use. They're really good along with, and they're free. So there's also Free Pick. So it has a lot of Photoshop and vector images. And this one, as long as you have like a Google account, it just like makes me sign in. But a lot of it's free. Some of it's you have to pay for. I found things on here for free, no issue. And you can just search for this one and say even you want to find Photoshop. Because if things look similar, because things work similar, Photoshop files, some of them you can open up. They talk nicely, but you probably would want to like edit that in Photoshop and then bring it over to Illustrator. So I put this in, and then if I notice on this image, it has this kind of muffly backside. It's, got a shade to it. And so what I'm going to do is use my Blob Brush, and that's under my paintbrush. It's Shift B. And I'm going to just go ahead and say I want this to be no stroke, but I want to have a fill. And I'm going to kind of color in my blob brush here. And that makes it very, very opaque. Not super helpful, right? I can't even see. So first off, I'm going to right click. I'm going to say arrange, and I'm going to say send backwards. So it's going below. I'm going to send backwards one more. So that I know that it's, I might go another. I want it to be under everything. So now it's under both. I also am going to come over here and go to appearance. And again, remember I use this opacity. I want to go to my opacity, and I'm going to make my opacity pretty far down. So that way it's kind of, again, getting to be not quite as bright. Another thing that I can do is actually come in here, and I can actually go up to effect. I'm going to look at Illustrator effects, not Photoshop right now. I'm going to go to stylize. I'm going to say feather. I'm just going to keep it where it's at. And what you're going to do is it's now kind of blurring that edge, and it's making it softer. So this is kind of like one of those tools. There's so many tools to like manipulate once you get past like the basics. It's pretty fun. So we can put that in, and you see my outline. If I was to hover over it, actually goes past because it looks like there's a white, but that's because we feathered the edge. And so now we've put this down below, and it's made it, not quite as bright. And if I wanted to, I could come to my opacity. I can move it down even further, really make it like not super bright. I can always turn off the opacity. I have all these options, but yeah. And so we've been working on layer 1 this entire time. I should say that. And so you have layers as you're working through, and you can always turn on and off layers for things that you're using and not using, or if you're editing something and you don't want it to, affect something else. I could turn off my entire thing, but just know that these are all here. And we've been working on one artboard. So I've been doing this for so long, and again, I've been working through, I might be interested in, actually, I turned off that, but I guess I didn't. Okay, so I've been working on this, and again, I'm going to come over here and I want to see what it looks like in black and white, or so in this grayscale. And so now I can see, what the different, how it's going to look if it's just printed in black and white, how it's going to look for low contrast. And well, a lot of times when I'm using in creating something, I can just easily come and kind of get the overall feeling, less colors this way. And if I'm going through right now, these have the same level of importance, just like arrows, like you have like this arrow, both of these are a heavier weight and bigger than these for showing importance. If I have text at the top, so like this one at the top, it says, I believe it says pathological. So I can just go and put pathological in here. I'm going to want to make sure that I am making it a larger font size because I want to show that hierarchy as people are going through and reading because you're trying to convey, so much in a graphic, but you're needing to make sure that that graphic is in a way that people can understand. Okay. Let me come back. And then if you need to put it into, you can also, I have lots of, okay, so I have this, I'm sorry.
Oh, hey, Denise. I have a question. It's kind of, I just wanted to know your preference. So if I'm working with a bunch of raster images, like, do you prefer using Illustrator or or do you like working with Photoshop better? Like, what do you think are the, advantages of either one?
I like Illustrator better. I have used Photoshop longer, I will say that, than Illustrator, but I like some of what you can do with the tools with Illustrator in creating figures. Photoshop to me is like a whole different mindset, and I think of it more on like the photo side and more graphic. And then with Illustrator, I feel like I'm creating more stories almost.
Gotcha. Okay.
Um, is there any other questions? That's what I kind of wanted to ask. I also wanted to show if you like something, you can always export it. I like to do export as. You can choose your type of what you're exporting as. And again, all of these have different uses, whether it's a JPEG or I don't think you would want to do it as a text format, but so I can just export this as untitled, and then I can choose my color mode. So if I am doing it for sometimes for a print a screen that does want RGB, I could choose it into RGB style from there, but I've created it in that cyan, magenta, yellow, black, so I can make sure that those colors are ready in case it's going to be printed. I can also choose my resolution. 72 is screen size, again, high. I like to, especially when I'm looking at things, I want to go in and be able to see all my edges and all my lines, because when I'm submitting like to a journal or something, this is what I am going to be using. I use this for creating graphs, and it makes it like much cleaner lines. And then I can come in here and find, and this is like the JPEG that I made so far. And again, we're playing, but you can come in and I can, zoom in and I can see the fact, see what I'm making. And it helps me also kind of see that there might be like a little hole I need to go fix over there. But I've just talked a whole bunch. So is there any questions about anything?
And just out of curiosity, how do you deliver like files like this?
Are you talking about the Illustrator file or the?
Yes. So like
Okay.
if you're done and let's say now you're doing this for the school, like how would you deliver it as an Illustrator file? Or because I noticed in what you showed earlier, you had what is it, EPS and something else. So just curious.
Oh, yeah. So it's really easy. I use Google Drive to like put things in and then go from like computer to computer that way. Um, if it gets to be too big, because that's one of the preferences, right, for using JPEG, is because you can make really small file sizes. So if you need to, you could always zip it into something. But I have found that usually I can put things into my Google Drive, and that really works out pretty well. And that's for like the actual Illustrator or Photoshop files, not the end files. The flow examples I showed you earlier, I did put them in here. Oh, this is where this one came from. I knew this is like the journal it came from, so you can see, because I just wanted you to see. And then kind of the example that we worked on. Here's this Illustrator file. I will actually put this illustration sample that we've been working on in here if you want to take a look. So you have access to this. And then the colors info that I had shared that's in here. And again, most journals will tell you, but yeah, there's a lot. That's everything. I mean, I feel like I just talked a whole bunch, so hopefully you can play around with Illustrator. If you ever have questions, you can always get in contact with me. I should have pulled up my info. I'm always so bad at that. Wait, I'll just go to subject librarians. But you can get in contact with me. So if you have questions about Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign, things like that, I can always answer them. But otherwise, thank you for coming. Sometimes you might want to explore InDesign also for some reports too, because you can do page layout. It's really good for newsletters. You're welcome. And you can actually pull elements from all of them across and in. So like if I'm making something in InDesign, I might then, edit something, like I'll do my editing of a graph in Illustrator. And then depending on the picture, I might do that in either Photoshop or Illustrator and then pull it in. So it all talks really well. And I would say Illustrator and InDesign, if you learn how to use them, a lot of the shortcuts are the same, super easy. Photoshop is the one that has a little bit of differences, but still if you can use one, you can kind of figure out all of them.
Great. Thanks, Denise. This is really helpful because I'm seeing there are similarities between the Illustrator and even, in Photoshop too, the way things are organized. So I appreciate this. Thank you.
You're welcome. Y'all have a great day.